Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon to talk all things Washington Update and August Advocacy. I'm Tess Humbry, I'm NARO's Director of Legislative Affairs, and I'm joined by my colleague Jenna Hampton and by NARO's Legislative Network Chair Jennifer Keogh. Really excited that you guys are here this afternoon. So we're going to get started. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in DC this summer, and then we'll shift into some updates on August Advocacy and what we're trying to accomplish this summer. Jenna, do you want to give us a rundown on where we are with appropriations?
Sure, thanks Tess. Hi everyone. So a couple of updates on the appropriations process for this year. We now have both the House and the Senate budget proposals for fiscal year 2023. They both provide an increase for the HUD budget in line with kind of what we were expecting to see. One thing that we've heard from appropriators that is promising is that they're trying to keep inflation in mind, the higher than normal inflation numbers that we've had, to make sure that our programs are covered as far as inflation costs go. And they're trying to increase funding for some of the programs that we've been advocating consistently for. So we were happy to see the budget increases proposed there. The Senate numbers did come in slightly lower than the House on a few key accounts. So that's something that we are looking at. For example, the capital fund was a little bit lower than what the House proposed, but it's still proposed at $3.2 billion in the Senate, which is, or 3.225. Which is higher than what was even enacted last year. So we are still glad to see the fact that capital fund is being proposed higher and higher, that Congress is recognizing hopefully how important the capital fund is to preserving public housing for the future. We also were disappointed to see that the Senate came in significantly lower than the House on the incremental vouchers. So the new vouchers that are trying to be proposed. The president's budget had it at $1.55 billion for new vouchers. The House came in at $1.1 billion, but the Senate only came in at $50 million. So that was significantly lower than what we had seen from the president's budget and the House budget. So we're not sure what will happen with the incremental vouchers, but that's one of the accounts where the Senate came in much lower. So Tess, were there any other accounts that you wanted to mention before I continue with appropes?
Yeah, and just like broad overview on that, the Senate typically does come in lower than the House, and I think that is part of the House's calculations when they're trying to figure out how much to allocate to each program. They kind of know which accounts are likely to get a lower funding level from the Senate. So this is all part of the negotiations that will happen between the House and the Senate. So this is all very, very normal. One thing I do want to highlight, the admin fees for vouchers in the Senate were a little bit higher than the House. And so we were pretty happy to see that. And yeah, just overall, both bills look pretty decent. And so I think we're going to be in good shape, especially considering where we are with inflation going into final negotiations.
Yeah, and it still is promising to see that they are trying to fund new vouchers, and we'll see where they end up with that, but it is hard to get them to ever fund new vouchers because appropriators know that once they fund vouchers, they're going to need to continue funding them even as they increase in the amount of the HUD budget that they require every year. So it's promising that they're recognizing the need for more rental assistance and more vouchers. We'll just have to see where the final number ends up for this fiscal year. So then just a couple of things to think about in the upcoming months. The fiscal year ends September 30th, so we're closing in on that date pretty quickly. And Congress probably won't work very heavily on appropriations this month because it's August recess and most of them are at home and their districts are working the campaign trail before elections. So it's pretty likely that we'll have a continuing resolution to carry forward last year's funding to this fiscal year 23, the beginning of it, as we have a continuing resolution. And then we'll just see what happens from there. Usually the hardest part is for appropriators to come to terms with their top line funding levels and some of the policy riders that go along with appropriations. So that's what we are waiting to see worked out and negotiated kind of at the higher level of the appropriations process. But the HUD budget looks in pretty decent shape, and we'll just stay on top of that and let you all know when you need to advocate for those as well. And then one last point is that we don't know how elections might impact the appropriations process, at least from a political standpoint. So I was going to let Tess kind of speak to that, but I think it may change the process depending on what happens with elections, even though the turnover doesn't happen until January. Once midterms happen, the new Congress won't start until January, but depending on what happens with elections, there may be some political moves or considerations for appropriations this year. So Tess, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it go both ways with appropriations after an election. Like pretty much, we've never seen appropriations done on October 1st. At least I haven't in my 14-ish years working on appropriations. So it really can be a crapshoot. Like if the politics of the midterms push members to want to finalize spending before January when the new Congress takes over, or if everything is too chaotic because of the outcome of the election, and they want to delay decisions further. So yeah, we don't know which way it's going to go. Some things we do know. One, Leahy, who's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, he said that they aren't going to start negotiating top line levels with Republicans until after the midterm election, which is frankly politically realistic, if not a little disappointing from my perspective, wanting to see appropriations finalized as quickly as possible. But it didn't surprise me to hear that. It just it's a little disappointing. But that really does set our timeline back a bit. They don't seem very far apart on an overall level, but what they do seem far apart on is the split between non-defense or domestic spending and defense spending. And that's a major thing that held up negotiations last year until March. So it makes me a little nervous to add all the dynamics of a midterm election into what was already a fairly difficult conversation in the first place. So we'll see exactly what happens. There's really two trajectories. One, for whatever reason, the midterm elections end in a way that members, whoever's taking over in January, they want to deal with other issues and they don't want to deal with appropriations. And so we'll see a final bill in December. That happens pretty frequently. But then the other possibility is that whichever party is taking over wants to make those decisions, and maybe it's the Republicans who aren't in power right now, they may decide that they want to hold things up until probably February or March, and make those decisions when they have control of the House or the Senate. So those are two possibilities. We've seen both things happen in recent years, and unfortunately, if the spending decisions get pushed past the end of the calendar year, it's probably going to be late winter, early spring at the earliest before we see a final bill for fiscal year 23. And of course, there's always a possibility that there's a full year continuing resolution if really no decisions can be made. But I do think the inflation levels would complicate that this year. So we'll keep an eye on how those conversations are going. But I do think that if there is a CR, they're going to have to make some pretty big adjustments to some of the accounts to make sure that it's not a de facto cut to programs. So yeah, basically we don't know what's happening with appropriations, but we do know that nothing will happen until after the midterm elections. We'll touch on August recess in a minute, but it is really important that we continue to remind members of Congress that we do remember that annual appropriations is a thing that needs to happen, and that you guys rely on annual appropriations for funding, and they do need to do their job as quickly as possible, even recognizing that they're going to miss that October 1st deadline. So we'll talk about that in a second, but it is always good to nudge your members of Congress to get them to do their jobs just a little bit quicker than last year. Shifting gears away from appropriations, and I should mention that we will take questions at the end, or if I see any pop up in the chat box, we can answer them as we go, but we'll have some time at the end for questions on anything, if anything pops into your head. So the other major thing that's been happening in DC this summer is reconciliation. As you guys remember, Build Back Better had, I think it was about $170 billion for housing funding. That bill died a very dramatic death back in December, was never considered by the Senate. And since then, it's basically been negotiations between Senator Joe Manchin and Democratic leadership trying to come up with some sort of a package that Manchin would agree to, but also could get the support of some of the more left-leaning House members that they do need to bring on board, and the moderate House members, and some of the other Senate contingencies. It's really a very wide group of people they're trying to cater to, but mostly the negotiations have been between Manchin and Schumer. They surprised everybody a couple of weeks ago by, it was sort of funny politically to watch. They were claiming for weeks that reconciliation is dead, this wasn't happening. It turns out that was just an elaborate ploy to try to get Republicans on board with a different piece of legislation that they were only willing to agree to if reconciliation wasn't going to happen. So it was, I don't know, 20 minutes after a Senate vote on the bill to move it over to the House when Manchin and Schumer announced that they had reached a reconciliation deal. So I don't think Republicans were too happy about that. But it very much was like a McConnell style move that was entertaining to see. So the package in total, it's like $430 billion in new spending and $300 billion in deficit control. There is some funding in there for resiliency and climate change retrofits to multifamily housing, but unfortunately none of our programs are impacted by that. So it's disappointing to see that there were investments in housing, but nothing going to the core HUD programs that really do need those investments. The package overall is really focused on energy and healthcare and climate change. So overall, like generally fine things, but nothing that NARO really touches on. So again, a little disappointing to see the drama of the last like 16 months and like this, but they had to do something before September 30th because that's when the budget expires, and that's when their ability to use reconciliation for fiscal year 22 expires. So they had to move, and this is what they could move on. So again, disappointing from NARO's perspective, but politically it was entertaining to watch unfold. So that's really been where Congress's energy has been spent. The House is coming back into session tomorrow briefly to vote on reconciliation. It was passed by the House or the Senate last week, and then they'll be in recess until mid-September. So from a housing perspective, we've really gotten left out of some of those conversations, but I am keeping an eye towards the lame duck session, especially given all the press that inflation is getting. Yesterday, there was a CPI report that shows that inflation in most things is actually receding a bit, except for in consumer goods like food and shelter. And shelter increasingly is a huge driver of inflation, and consumers certainly are feeling that as their rents are going up, and as people don't feel like home purchase with the rates increasing is a wise move, and they're going to the rental market. So there's a lot of pressures on the housing market that are really, really public right now, getting a lot of media attention. And if that continues through the election cycle, I could see that becoming more and more of an issue as members of Congress campaign at home. So we're keeping an eye on the lame duck session. I don't know exactly what will be possible, especially since we haven't seen the outcome of the election yet, but there may be opportunity there that we are keeping an eye on. But that in a nutshell is what's happening in DC. We wanted to pivot now to talk about our August advocacy campaign, which is our largest advocacy campaign of the year, and some of the things that we are focusing on to get the word out in Congress about affordable housing issues. Our Legisnet Chair Jennifer here is here to join us to talk to us a bit about August advocacy. Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about what our kind of crazy goals are for this this August advocacy campaign?
Yeah, thanks, Tess, and welcome all of you viewers. I think when I think about August advocacy, people say, does it make an impact? Right? Does the work that we do when we send letters, I've committed personally to send one letter per day. Does it make a difference? And I would say yes. You have a toolbox. Every single one of you, as a leader in housing or a houser, just in general, or community development professional, you have a toolbox. August advocacy, sending letters, is one tool in that toolbox. And it builds on other things. So what August Advocacy is sending letters to our members of Congress. We have heard time and time again that particularly on issues of housing, where members and staffers say, we never heard from you. We never heard from housers. We never heard that this was an issue. Letters matter. Every single letter is counted. By some intern, some staffer in the office has to count these letters so that when they say, are these issues a big deal? Yes, we have heard from NARO. They sent many letters about appropriations, about the need for increased housing choice vouchers, about the increase in capital funds. And guess what? We have seen the results of our labor. This past year, those of you that administer public housing, you saw an increase in your capital funds. And I will tell you, it is because of the tireless work that NARO has done to create the story of the backlog, the $70 billion backlog, and that you have risen to the challenge to continue to tell the story of the need for your agencies. And so we, for the first time, saw an increase in capital fund. And that, again, is due to the tireless work. We have some big goals this year. And the reason we have big goals is we want to not be an afterthought. We don't want to be on the chopping block. We don't want to be the first thing when people look at appropriations that they cut. We want them to say, no, this has to stay in the budget. So our goal for 2022 for August is to send 50,000 letters in the month of August. And Tess is going to talk a little bit about the topics that we've created, but every week we have a different letter with a different topic. Again, I've committed to send one letter per day in the month of August. One letter, one click of a button actually goes to 4 people, the president, my 2 senators, and my rep. 4 letters. So I did the math, that's 124 letters that I'm going to personally send in the month of August. And I hope that you will go back and commit yourself to sending letters, and ask your teams to send letters. Show the importance to the people that work with you, why this matters at a local level. If I understand, if I'm an eligibility technician in the voucher department, but I understand the importance of sending that letter is because it will increase the amount of funding that we have to be able to do our jobs, I'm more inclined to send a letter. So connecting it to people is really, really important. As of this morning, we have, out of 50,000 letters, we've sent 6,308 letters. So guess what? We've got 43,692 letters to go, but we can do this. NARO has shown up time and time again to be a great fourth quarter team. But I don't want to be a fourth quarter team. Like, I want to be hitting this out of the ballpark, by the end of week 3. So this is my ask of each of you listening, is to commit to sending those letters. We also, outside of just sending letters, is we know that our base is so big. There are so many of us that work in housing that we want to also increase the number of unique advocates. We set a goal of having 2,500 people uniquely sending letters. And as of this morning, 542 unique advocates, which is wonderful. We're increasing. Just from last year, our number of advocates are increasing, but we can do better than that. So again, it's a personal commitment. I do, and I've said this before, I believe it's our obligation as leaders in housing to do this work. It's our job to lift our voices for the programs we administer, our communities, the people we serve. It's our job. And so I will leave you with that. Tess, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you'd like me to touch on outside of like the gas? Like, we need to put our foot on the gas and really get cracking here.
Yeah, I mean, we are making progress towards our goal of 50,000, but if we don't push the gas a little bit, we may not quite make it there. So don't make me send my angry emails, especially to LegNet, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you've made it so easy. I mean, I think, and you've given us the tools to make this so easy, and you can tailor the letters and make them, very personal, or if not, you can just literally hit click, and in less than a minute, I can send 4 letters every single day. So it's 31 minutes of my time in August that I'm going to spend on this. I don't think it's a heavy lift.
Yeah, and I mean, your letters really do actually make a difference in congressional offices, probably in ways that people don't necessarily recognize. So it's mostly interns that are seeing these letters come into a general inbox, but they take notes on what the topics are. And if there's enough topics on a letter, it triggers a few internal conversations about the topic. And so they'll talk about it. Somebody will have to do research to explain it to the boss. If you get enough letters sent on a topic, some offices will decide to draft one of those canned responses that you get specifically to that topic. So you want that, you want them responding with the word like voucher in it or public housing, because that means that you force the office to think about the issue, take a stance on it, and draft something that's officially coming from the member. And so that really is the first process with members of Congress that maybe aren't on a housing committee or appropriations or on some sort of a committee that forces them to think about the issues in depth. This is forcing them to think about the issues, the housing issues, our programs in a way that they respond to. So that's really what we're trying to get at is build awareness and make your members of Congress do work to learn about what it is you do. So the topics that we have prepared this August, and I'm really excited, these are in conjunction with our summer symposium and first August Advocacy Virtual Hill Day that happened last week. So we had, it was 140 meetings last week with a August Advocacy agenda that we put together that's on a website that Jenna will talk about in a second. But the topics are very, it's all very streamlined messaging. And so those offices got the agenda last week. And then throughout the month of August, we're focusing on these topics individually so that that's reinforced again and again by other constituents. So that it's just very, very streamlined common messaging. And so the topics are federal housing solutions work, a bit of a more positive note, just recognizing that we're in an affordable housing crisis, but the solutions that Congress have created and the resources that they've provided work to solve these problems. They just need to create more opportunity. Next topic is addressing housing scarcity. So that was our letter last week. So housing supply, the low-income housing tax credit, home and CDBG. This week, we're focusing on expanding access to housing vouchers. So making sure that we're accessing more families that are eligible for rental assistance. Next week, we're focusing on increasing voucher effectiveness. So making sure that housing authorities have the flexibilities that they need to lease up vouchers and work with landlords in these pretty challenging rental markets. The following week, we'll be preserving the public housing program. So making sure that your operating fund is robust, and we're addressing the $70 billion plus backlog and deferred maintenance for the Public Housing Capital Fund. And then finally, we're going to round out our campaign with passing timely and robust annual appropriations. So what we were talking about earlier, just trying to get fiscal year 23 done before March of 2023. But yeah, so those are our topics. We're really hopeful that you guys identify with them, and we'll add some personal detail about those topics and how they apply to your community. But it is really important that congressional offices hear the same message over and over again, so that they are forced to think about and form opinions on some of these issues. And then we have a wealth of resources for you. I'm really excited about the website that Jenna's put together for our August Advocacy this month. Jenna, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm excited about it too. We wanted to have more resources for you all just for the campaign in general. So I'm going to show you, I already put this in the chat, and you should be able to see, this is our August Advocacy website. So you can scroll through here to just read about the campaign this year. We have the topics listed out that Tess just went through. If you kind of forgot what all the topics are for this year, you can have a refresher here. And then our August Advocacy agenda goes into more detail about the topics. And goes through all of our NARO recommendations as far as our policy priorities that go along with those topics. So you can download the agenda here. It's just a PDF file, so you can click here or here to download the agenda and get into that. We also have our goals listed out. So the 50,000 letters, the 2,500 participants, and the 50 site visits. And then when you click on learn more, you can see a whole goal page that tracks all the goals and breaks it down by regions. So we do always have a regional competition every year to see who can send the most letters out of each region. And we'll also see who can get the most people involved from each region too. So just be thinking about how you can work together as a region to help accomplish these goals too. And it's all tracked on the website. And then we do have a site visit goal this year that's also new. We'd like to have 50 site visits within the course of the calendar year, like Tess and Jennifer mentioned. So we have a page on the website too, where you can learn more about site visits, how to set those up. And then also we'd really love it if you could report those to us. So that way we can count them toward the goal and that we can know who you met with and just have a list of that as part of the campaign. And then also Tess and I's information is here for you really easily. If you ever have troubles with sending letters or any questions about the campaign, you can reach out to us. And so one thing I wanted to show you again is just if anyone hasn't sent letters before, you guys can see this, the second tab, right, that I just opened, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The Action Center, yeah, we got
Yes. Okay, so this is the Action Alert Center. If you haven't sent a letter before, some people have told us that it's been difficult to figure out where to click. But if you just look in the gray box and you see that we have 3 letters in there right now, we have our bonus letter, we have our week 1 letter, and we have our week 2 letter. So when you're scrolling over these letters, you see how it changes color from white to gray. That means that you can click anywhere on here to send the letter. So once you're physically, your clicker is over the letter, you just click anywhere on there and it brings you to a form where you can see what we've already uploaded, who your letters are going to. You can click in here to customize the letter if you want. And then here's where you fill in your information, and then one more click and pretty much it's off to those people. So basically when you're in this page, you just click anywhere on those letters to send them, and it takes you through the process. So once you're on this page, it's pretty straightforward, and like Jennifer said, it takes, you know, maybe 1 minute at the most, a couple minutes. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward once you've done it a couple times. So we have, again, the whole website for August Advocacy, which I put in the chat, and then our Action Alert Center where you can send the letters.
And so you mentioned, before we go, Jenna, but you mentioned there's some, you know, we like a little competition in here. And I know that my region was leading, and I think my state of Minnesota was 3rd place. I don't know. I haven't looked at the goal tracker today to know, like, am I still holding the lead?
You're in, so NCRC 2nd now, but CERC is going strong. I think they're
good because they had a big goal. So
400 letters, yeah.
Like CERC needs to pick it up a notch or 2.
So yes, but Mark also, I think Mark had a higher goal than CERC did. And Mark, I don't see you guys in the
Mark,
top
where are you?
rankings.
Where are you?
Where are you, Mark?
Mark the region.
Mark the region, not Mark
not the CEO.
Mark the CEO.
Although Mark is here with, well, he was here. Yeah, he's here with us too. So.
and you know what? He's sending his letters.
He is sending his letters.
He is. Yep.
So, you know, it was 2 years ago, I think that NCRC won over Southwest NARO. And I think I got barbecue from Mike Gerber and shipped from Texas. It was pretty awesome. But
that's amazing. Well, maybe we need to create some wagers. To really up the ante.
Maybe between CERC and Mark, get them going.
I like it.
Yeah.
Crab for, I don't know, what do you make in the North Central region?
I know. Bratwurst.
yeah, that seems right.
Hot dish. I mean, not hot dogs. Hot dish. I'm a horrible Midwestern. I'm like, I don't know what to eat.
Was it hot dish? That's
hot dish, yeah, right? Yeah, that's what there's that at the Senate, they have their hot dish competition.
Of course. All right, on that note.
On that note, don't
We're at the top
make
of the
me,
hour.
yeah, don't make me have to bribe you with hot dish.
Yeah, or me send nasty emails as I am known to do. All right, thank you everybody for joining us. Really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for
Thank you
inviting
for
me.
participating in our, thanks Jennifer. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks all. Take care.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.